So, I stopped watching Yu-Gi-Oh! More or less when I became an adult. That's obviously not true given, the title of this video, but you know what I mean. I saw 5Ds when I was in high school, and I didn't think that it was as bad as everyone said. It seemed like every new series got its turn to be roasted by the fans or the former fans, but I think that's about the end of my awareness of Yu-Gi-Oh! In the beginning, the original series kicks off with a quest for the Millennium Items, these old Egyptian artifacts that orbited the old pharaoh's power structure. Yugi, our protagonist, is the reincarnation of the old pharaoh, and is also possessed by his spirit, with whom he has this cute symbiotic relationship. Some memorable characters are the proletarian Joey Wheeler, the absolutely queer-coded Pegasus, or the lovely Mai Valentine. The series follows exchanges of the power of the items up until it gets a little off the rails, with an arc about Atlantis that, while highly memeable, is just not the best. The next series picks up with a school, where the leads learn how to duel. Jaden is our protagonist this time, and the series introduces two favorites of mine, Zane Truesdale and Chaz Princeton. The series doesn't have its best moments when it's in the tournaments like the original did, but does its best when it makes good use of the classroom and student dynamics. There's a charming dynamic with the three houses that, unlike some kind of Hogwarts knockoff, is really more indicative of students' grades and financial background. The dorms, Obelisk Blue, Rye Yellow, and Slifer Red, are all based on the iconic god cards from the original series too. I loved that dynamic. I was in middle school and I loved the idea of going to school to play card games. That would have been my paradise. The third series is a dystopian society of haves and have-nots where the irradiated satellite districts orbit the wealthier, influential ones. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always had class commentary in it, but this really bumped it into a higher gear. Yusei is our protagonist this time around, and there are some great, memorable characters that I loved, including the hilarious Jack Atlas or Akiza Izinski, who is a well-rounded, developed female character who uses plant cards, just like me. I'm also one of those. When these cards were getting printed, I pulled some of her cards from some packs, so I really identified with her in more ways than I wanted to admit at the time. That's about where I left off. But we're forgetting someone, aren't we? There are some great Yu-Gi-Oh! YouTubers out there who do theory crafting. If I can remember, I'll link some in the description. Seto Kaiba was my favorite character as a kid. He's a funny caricature of a billionaire. I always loved how much his voice actor plays up his egotistic nature. Kaiba is always searching for a new edge against the pharaoh who he sees as his true rival. In the movie, or one of them anyway, he literally kills himself so that he can get to the Egyptian afterlife for one final duel. That's so hardcore, man. But Kaiba is relevant to the future of Yu-Gi-Oh! Not only because he creates the synchros, his company creates the technology that irradiates the satellite. If you don't know much about what radiation does to you, it's really bad. It destroys you down to your genetics. It turns out that the synchros, representing fission technology as an alternative to fusions, are relevant to a perpetual motion machine that Kaiba Core and Yusei's father built. Is it Kaiba Core? Kaiba Corp? I think it's Kaiba Corp. I'm leaving that in because I don't care. I don't think it's relevant. I'm cribbing from more dedicated YouTubers out there, but to make a long story short, one problem with the perpetual motion machine is how all of the energy it creates gets released. Now sure, you solve the energy crisis, but the new energy crisis is an overabundance of energy, specifically an overabundance of energy concentrated in one area happening very fast and very hot. It probably sounds like a nice Saturday night, but it's more like Chernobyl with magical monsters. Things are so bad that time travelers come back to destroy the city and end the crisis. This results in a timeline split, and Yusei and their friends have to scramble to save the day. Now, the solution to this crisis is actually interdimensional technology. Normal systems can't contain this excess energy, but it can be routed out of the system via wormhole technology or other comparable methods. In ZEXAL, the technology that supplants synchros is XZ summons, which are done by, quote, building the overlay network to summon a new monster. Instead of adding levels, this requires matching levels, but nevertheless maintains the synchro summon aspect of using two relatively weaker monsters to summon a stronger monster. The pilot episode of ZEXAL opens with Yuma, a terrible duelist, doing his best in spite of his utter lack of talent. This was a great step away from the previous form of having a talented protagonist who only rarely loses as an exception. Yuma loses all the time, or barely wins, or needs a lot of help and makes mistakes. I've heard people complain about this, but it's weirdly relatable. Losing is part of learning to win. It's nice to see a character not at their peak, but at their valley, with all of this untapped potential. We meet Bronk, Yuma's friend and sentient Steve Odekirk digit, very briefly, but mostly meet Tori, Yuma's best friend, who is a female character with a nice character design. It's not too much to look at, but she's sweet. Our first real conflict is between Yuma and our bestest boy ever, Shark. I love him so much. Astral shows up to give Yuma advice, and he and Yuma don't immediately vibe with each other. In fact, it'll take several episodes for them to really click and start to warm up to each other. Yuma is rash and abrasive, whereas Astral is cold and calculating. But by the final season, both take on qualities of the other and grow, and that's the real theme of this show, personal growth. The lyrics of the opening theme make that really clear, although I wasn't in love with it as a song by itself. Astral helps Yuma squeak out a win over Shark, and the precedent of collecting the number cards is set with the aim of restoring Astral's memories. We learn a couple things really quickly and meet a few more principal characters. There's Caswell, whose catchphrase is, "in the end." There's Flip, who likes flip monsters and is generally pretty annoying. There's also the greatest Yu-Gi-Oh! Side character of all time, Kathy, who is a literal cat girl. She can talk to cats and appears to be part cat. She uses cat cards. No explanation is ever given for why she's like this, but she has a crush on Yuma and speaks primarily in cat puns. Personally, I think she's the cat's meow. I'm gonna go sit and think about what I've done now. But not before I tell you the rest. I think I hurt myself with that one. An early arc for Yuma is trying to get our best boy Shark out of trouble with a gang, and we find out Shark allegedly cheated, and that's why he's not the champion. The person who he allegedly cheated against is the current world champion, but we find out that doesn't really mean much and end up seeing a number of stronger duelists. I actually like when the world champion means something, and I hope future series keep more tournament content. But the show does have a tournament arc, and I think that it's probably one of the better parts of the anime. But before we get there, we have a few other episodes to get through. We meet Sparrow, who is a television star with a mother, but like, wow, who is very controlling. I recognized his persona and cards as being from one of the Hidden Arsenal sets. I actually have the Sparrow card, but Yuma helps him stand up to his mother and frees him from the control of one of the number cards, which can adversely exaggerate one's personality traits when possessing someone. He makes up with his mom and he goes back to his TV career. We also meet Kite, who is a very strong duelist and number hunter, to compete with Yuma on a mission with Dr. Faker, who helped create the city's technology, and Mr. Heartland, who owns the city. Kite's motives are mysterious, and he doesn't talk much. Yuma's chief monsters are the Xyz monster number 39 Utopia, which cancels attacks, and the Gagaga cards, which include Gagaga Magician and Gagaga Girl, and it's going to get harder every time that I have to say Gagaga in this video. And those are the Xyz-related mirror images of Yugi's Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl from the original series. All of these introductions to basic plot and characters are the core of the first season. Up to now, I've only mentioned Xyz summons, and that's because they're really the only summons out of the extra deck that exist in this series. This is a result of the timeline splitting previously, which is also why the world appears to be in a different state than the end of 5Ds would suggest. The second season moves into the World Duel Carnival, which is a sort of Duelist Kingdom and Battle City type tournament, welcoming duelists from around the globe, but taking place in a specific area, Heartland City. The episodes are a mixed bag. No Tomato is an episode about how kids should eat their fruits and vegetables. Love Hurts introduces a third romantic interest for Yuma in the form of a girl who, get this, goes to a different school. Life is a Carnival is about a duelist who uses luck-based techniques, and who is the former romantic interest or partner or ambiguous friend of Yuma's sister, who, by the way, is a really funny journalist caricature. There's the standard series mainstay of a couple psychic gimmick duelists, as well as the introduction of Nistro and Dextra, two great minor antagonists. Nistro is the overzealous type of guy who uses a lot of knight and wrestling motifs throughout the series, whereas Dextra is this sort of aloof female duelist who uses butterflies, one of my favorite animals, or insects or whatever. Dextra is transgender, change my mind. But one of the best episodes, And at time of viewing, absolutely the best is Pets Peeved, a Kathy episode where the cat girl fights a dog girl. It's basically everything you're imagining in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel, and I enjoyed it tremendously. We next find out about Kite's brother Hart, how he's the leverage Mr. Heartland has over Kite, and we learn more about the family of Vetrix, Quentin, Quattro, and Trey. Vetrix was betrayed by Kite's father, Faker, and Quattro is the world champion who beat Shark. Vetrix has this sort of man in the iron mask aspect to his design, but his English dub voice is super annoying because his body was altered in the accident to be a child's body. Trey is the youngest brother who goes up against Yuma at the end of the season out of a sense of duty to his father, who generally could care less about the lives of his sons, having been consumed by hatred. Astral sort of dies in this episode, but he appears with Yuma's missing father, who encourages him to cross back through space to Yuma's side, as Yuma is struggling in his duel to beat and also save Trey. It's a really touching moment when Astral appears and says, "I heard you were calling for me," in this really gentle, tender tone, and Yuma cries because he thought his friend was dead. These two characters have such good chemistry between them, and it really carries a lot of the show. One thing I forgot to mention is that in this arc, Yuma also trains under a master Roku and defeats his former student. This episode features a lot of references to monsters from the original series, which is a nice bit of fan service. Overall, Yuma is a dynamic character who develops quite a bit, and we can already see that in this early part of the tournament. Now's a good time to note that the Wikipedia entry notes this as the end of the second season, but the official website for the anime, where you can watch it for free, link in the description if I remember, lists it as the end of the first season, and since the wiki page is incomplete, I'll be using the official website as a reference point from now on. The second season is the continuation of the Duel Carnival into the finals, featuring Dextra versus Vetrix, Quentin versus Kite, Shark versus Quattro, and Yuma versus Nistro. Quattro and Quentin more or less reconcile at least some of their differences with their opponents, and lose their respective duels, thereby advancing Kite and Shark from the top 8 to the semifinals. The duel between Vetrix and Dextra is particularly heartbreaking, as Dextra is dueling to protect Kite and has the perfect plan, but Vetrix toys with her before defeating her in a really cruel manner. Nistro and Yuma isn't very eventful as a duel, in my opinion at least, but it's a grudge match, so it does have at least some tension in terms of how the outcome is achieved. Unlike in previous anime in the series, it's never 100% certain that Yuma will win a match. The semis are Yuma versus Shark and Vetrix versus Kite. Both duels are very tense and have a lot of emotional baggage invested in the outcome. Yuma is simultaneously once again battling to save his friend Shark, as much as beat him and advance to stop Vetrix, whereas Vetrix is fighting to get through Kite and revenge himself upon Dr. Faker. We see Faker humanized by his concern for his son, and so if Vetrix can hurt him through Kite, then from Vetrix's perspective, the revenge is all the sweeter. After Yuma's win, the Baryons, who have been sort of moving everything behind the scenes, apparently, attack and attempt to destroy Earth, but Vetrix is so moved by Yuma's attempt to save him even after all he's done, that he sacrifices himself to save humanity in recompense for his wrongs. The Baryons become the next main antagonists, and honestly, beyond a few funny encounters, the early half of this arc is kind of boring. We're meeting some new antagonists whose names I honestly can't all remember off the top of my head. One design feature of the true forms of the Baryons that I do like is the masked outfits that are reminiscent of the Arankars from Bleach. The Baryons are generally fun characters to see interact with our main cast, and some noteworthy ones are Mizar, who is the counterpart to Kite's Galaxy-Eyes Photon Dragon, the Galaxy-Eyes Tachyon Dragon, and Vector, who plays a dark counterpart to Yuma. The names of the Baryons, right on theme for ZEXAL, have their inspiration in the names for the stars that make up the Big Dipper constellation. I've already brought up my favorite Baryon, but I came to really like Vector for reasons I'll get into momentarily. Suffice it to say that for now, he tricks Yuma multiple times by masquerading as his annoying yet sincere friend Ray. Vector's antagonisms will become the ultimate test of Yuma's conviction that he should show compassion even to his enemies, and that friendship can overcome any quarrel. After the reveal of the Baryons, we find out that there are even more powerful Xyz cards, and the hints to find them have been left behind by Yuma's father. Astral brings back some old technology from space, and it's a race against time. We slowly learn that each of the Baryons has a hidden past, and we soon find that Shark and his sister Rio do as well. We're slowly introduced more and more to a villain whose voice and vague shadowy appearance have been a presence in the series from the very beginning, Don Thousand. He's sort of the Baryon, and we later find out created and corrupted each of the 7 Baryon emperors. Unfortunately, Don Thousand seems a little underdeveloped. I think he operates best as a metaphor for deceit, temptation, and corruption, sort of like the Sauron of a universe where battles are resolved by card games, which admittedly would be a pretty fun take on Lord of the Rings. Eventually, Don Thousand restores the memories of Shark and Rio, and they betray Yuma to defend Baryon World, thus threatening Astral World and the human world. United with the other Baryon Emperors, Yuma and his friends that he's made over the entire series absolutely do not stand a chance. And one by one, they fall defending Yuma's escape. Yuma travels to Baryon World and one by one defeats or convinces the Baryon Emperors to join him. Eventually, Yuma faces down Vector and Shark as well as Don Thousand. The series concludes with Astral attempting to reinvigorate Yuma's love for dueling after all of their life and death situations. What I find really interesting is the redemption of Vector, also called Ray at one point in the series. Yuma trusts Ray and is betrayed, and then later saves Ray and is betrayed again. This is a serious challenge to Yu-Gi-Oh's theme of friendship conquering all. Some characters aren't redeemable. In the original series, Bandit Keith, for example, is a liar and a cheat, and he's never properly redeemed, even though his anger is understandable. Ray, however, is touched even in his second betrayal by Yuma's refusal to abandon him despite the betrayal. This expands on the theme. Even if they hurt you, treating someone with compassion can sometimes, especially because you aren't obligated to, be a deeply powerful gesture. Ultimately, this goes far to redeeming Ray as a character, and he finally realizes that Yuma's loyalty isn't something that he can shake, it's permanent. Now, that's a whole lot of summary, which I feel obligated to do in this essay, because I know for a fact most viewers will not have watched ZEXAL. American audiences did not receive the series as well as its predecessors, finding Yuma to be annoying and the initial plot to be derivative. While I empathize with that perspective, I also feel that the show deeply expands on the central themes of Yu-Gi-Oh!, those being friendship, loyalty, trust, and perseverance. We even get additional motifs of touching sacrifice, and even more so than in the previous series. ZEXAL is a remarkable, sincere entry in the overall saga of Yu-Gi-Oh!, and represented a fresh start for the continuity of this series, at least in terms of testing the water. Future series will go on to try similar new separate continuities, despite loose plot connections, and this was the sort of pioneer of all of those attempts. ZEXAL also has a higher index of complex and strongly written female characters than, I think, any of the previous series, although I don't think that my love for Kathy or Dextra really compares to my adoration of Akiza. Ultimately, this series has its merits. The animation isn't really that bad either, being remarkably more vibrant in color and fluid in motion than previous entries were, although the latter improvement was present in much of 5Ds as well. There are a number of iconic cards and touching moments, with homages to previous series making 1 or 2 brief appearances. I hope this has, at minimum, convinced you to try this series if you like Yu-Gi-Oh!, and persist at least into the second season if you do, after which the stakes and character building heat up significantly. Now that's it for me this time, everybody. I wanted to keep this video short and sweet for the algorithm and also for the sake of being easily digestible by you, the viewers, and the patrons that make this all possible. I couldn't do it without you. If you have suggestions for future media-related topics, writing introspections, reviews, thematic analysis, etc., please leave a comment down below so I can take your ideas into consideration. Until next time, be well, stay safe, and think critically.